This is the Kevin Henry Podcast, where we give a voice to the silenced and shine a light into the darkest corners of our justice system. Today you'll hear from Kaitlan Ross. When Kaitlan Ross met Aaron, she thought she had found love. Turns out she was sleeping with the enemy. What started as a loving relationship quickly turned into a nightmare: manipulation, stalking, strangulation, and sexual abuse. And when Kaitlin tried to leave, the abuse only escalated. But here's the twist. The most brutal betrayal didn't come from him. It came from the family court system. Instead of protecting Kaitlin and her newborn daughter Charlotte, the courts gave her abuser more power, using her own child as a weapon to maintain control. What happened to Kaitlin is not just heartbreaking, it's unacceptable. And she's here today to tell her story. Not just for herself, but for every woman and child still trapped in the nightmare she fought so hard to escape. This isn't just one story. This is a warning. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear will leave you furious. Let's get into it. No one is above the law. The people have had enough. We will root out the criminals and expose them all. We're fighting to expose the criminal element in Texas. Our investigation in the Brazoria County's justice system has just begun.
And now your host, Kevin Henry.
And welcome back to the Kevin Henry Podcast. And please, before we get started, like and subscribe. It helps get our show to the top of the charts. And help us welcome Kaitlan Ross to the show. Welcome, Kaitlan.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So can you take us back to the 2017 during the Guadalupe River trip that you and Aaron took, how you first connected and what drew you to him?
Yeah, so it was actually started off of a blind date. My best friend at the time was going to be meeting up with what is his best friend, and she asked me to come along and just kind of chaperone, and we ended up meeting. I met Aaron on that trip. He was a very kind, sweet man at that point, and seemed to check all the boxes. Very, very doting and seemed very genuine.
And that was in the summer of 2017, correct?
Yes, that was June of 2017.
You were engaged to him by Christmas, right?
I was.
So tell us about that.
At that point in time, I was still working as a consultant and kind of moving all around the country on different projects and whatnot. And I was looking to get out of that kind of line of work. I always just wanted to be a stay-at-home mom and have kids and have a farm and a garden and all those fun things. And so he seemed to be in line with those goals and dreams, and told me, if I didn't want to go work and travel anymore, that I didn't have to, and that we would be all right. And so that, along with, meeting his other kids and loving on them, and it all seemed to fit the mold of everything we were looking for, and really seemed to align together.
Did you see any early signs in the relationship prior to the engagement of like the red flags or anything that you recognized at that time?
Not at that time. I mean, hindsight's 2020. I can definitely see some now, but at the time, I mean, it was just a whirlwind, and everything seemed great looking through rose-colored glasses.
And Aaron blamed his cheating on your career.
Yes.
And how did he twist the situation and pressure you to give up your independence?
So I was working in just outside of Greeley, Colorado. At that point, I'd only been on that project a couple of months, and I found out that he was meeting women online and taking them out on dates with his other children. When that came out, he told me it was because I was gone too much and I was working. And so he needed, physical touch. And if I were there or if I were closer, then we wouldn't deal with those kind of infidelities. Obviously now, looking back, terrible idea. Right. But at the point, I was like, okay, well, I want to make everything work. And I understand that my career field, isn't very compatible all the time. So I made that decision and gave up my career and came to move in with him with the contingency that I'm not the kind who can't just stop working. I have to have something to do. So we planned on buying a little business where I can work from home and still be around the kids and family every day.
Right. So how did you find out that he was cheating on you?
It was through some photos that he took, and the stories didn't line up with what he was saying. And then some of the comments that his kids made, just stories weren't lining up. And so when I questioned him on it, he came clean. There were 17 women, I believe. 17? 17.
Wow. And so you said that he had pushed for children before marriage, and he even tampered with birth control. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So I have an older son, and he's now 18. He was 12 at the time. I raised him by myself. And so with that background, I was very cautious, and I told him, I've done the single mom thing, and I don't want to have any more kids until we're married. But after that, I'd love a football field of kids.
Right.
And
you got to have somebody to work on the farm, right?
Right. Well, and he was very adamant and, I don't want to get married unless I know you can have children. And I said, that's fine. We can go to a doctor or something, get everything checked out. Less than a month after I moved in with him, I found out that I was pregnant. And when I brought that to him, that's when he told me that some of the contraceptive methods that we were using might have been fooled with. And I went and grabbed the box and looked at them. And sure enough, there were holes poked through condoms. And then I found out later that he was actually taking an off-label fertility enhancing drug as well. Wow.
So he was going to great lengths to make sure that you got pregnant with his child.
Yes. Yeah. And he has this belief that he has superior genes. And that's something that he had said multiple times, was that, he wants to be able to have lots of children because he has these superior genes that he wants to pass on.
Very interesting. So he started demanding control of your finances, in your business. What was the breaking point for you?
The breaking point was May 3rd. I had already gotten into an agreement to purchase my business, and this was after he had asked me to sign over my vehicles into his name and various accounts into his name, which I had refused to do. But in early May, we were supposed to be going into this marina together, and it came time to pay the piper, and he was going to be putting in a percentage, right? We're going half and half. He's going to put in not even half and half, but $5,000. And he drew a line in the sand and said that he wanted me to sign over 51% of my company, which was purchased just shy of $500,000. He wanted me to sign over 51%.
The business was $500,000. Mm-hmm. And he was going to put in 5,000.
Yes.
But he wanted 51%.
Yes.
And you guys were not married.
Not only were we not married, but this was a week or two after finding out that he had misrepresented where he currently was. He told me he had gotten divorced and that they were dealing with some custody issues. And at that point, I found out that he wasn't even actually divorced.
So he was married this whole time.
He was still married.
So you plus 17 women.
Yes.
Wow. So how was it that you found that out?
Being around his kids and meeting his ex-wife, current wife at that time, just as soon as I moved in, all of that started coming out, and learning that they weren't just dealing with a custody issue. The actual divorce had not been finalized.
And did you hear anything about that divorce? Like hindsight 2020, looking back and hearing stories about that divorce, did you hear why maybe she had left?
Yes. So from what I was able to gather, there was emotional abuse. Was her initial reason for filing. I know she packed up the kids and all her things while he was at work one day and went to a safe friend's house in order to move along with those proceedings. And obviously the story I got from him in the moment was that he's, just this victim, and he has just had his life ripped away from him, and he needs help and stability and comfort and safety. And now learning the ins and outs of what occurred, I know that was not an accurate representation.
Got you. So what happened when he asked you or requested 51% of the business?
Oh, it was a big fight. It was a big fight. And he told me that was what he needed as a act of faith to him to move forward with our relationship. Now, granted, this is after I've learned about all the other women in the dating apps. And this is after I find out that he is not actually divorced. So my faith wasn't real strong in that particular moment. And I told him no. And just the mask came off and I saw who he actually was. So I ended the relationship.
Rightfully so. So can you walk us through the traumatic events on, was it May 4th?
We had broken up the night prior, and I was going to sleep on the couch because I had moved into his house with him in Matagorda. He woke me up at some point in the night and told me to go sleep in the room and that he would sleep on the couch. So that's what I did. And I woke up the following morning to his hands around my throat, and he was sexually assaulting me.
I'm sorry.
After he finished, he told me to get up and go take a shower and that I was disgusting, and started making comments about me being overweight and how gross I am. And I went to take a shower, and then he came in the bathroom, and I asked him, please don't let my bra fall off the toilet into the toilet. And he told me that I should worry about not slipping and falling to my death. And after that, I left and I went to my marina. And a couple hours later, he had texted and asked me if I wanted to discuss everything and figure out where we were going. And
that incident never happened.
Right. Oh, well, he did apologize for the slip and fall to your death comment.
But not the brutal assault.
Right. And so he came down to the marina, and then he started doing donuts in my driveway and harassing my staff and harassing me until I called law enforcement, and he called law enforcement as well. And I was telling him to get off my property, and they arrived. I actually had to go meet them at a gas station just down the road so that I wouldn't be alone with him anymore. And he tried to follow me down there as well. We're about a 30-minute response time for law enforcement.
This is in Sargent, right?
This is in Sargent,
okay.
Yes. And so I filed the report. I let him know everything that happened leading up to this incident, leading up to me having to call them, including everything that occurred that morning. And they gave him a criminal trespass warning and said that a file would be created.
So you're not from this area. You've just opened up a new business, and you're basically in this area because of him.
Correct.
And you find out that he's messing with contraceptives. He's married, and he's starting to demand your finances, your business, your vehicles. What's going through your head at this point? No, and now seeing his reactions and what he's doing to your staff and what he's capable of from the night before, what's going through your head at this point?
So I'm growing nervous, and I already signed an agreement with the marina, so I feel kind of tied to my business as well. And I start trying to do whatever I can to just get him to separate away from me, right? Criminal trespass warnings, please stay off my property sort of things. It was never adhered to. Once I did make the separation, I was down at the marina temporarily until I could get my things moved. And that's when the stalking and the harassment started. So I was contacting law enforcement and filing reports and doing everything that they told me to do. But that's when the big stress really began. And I was trying to balance that between knowing that we're going to have a child together, right? And so trying to figure out an amicable agreement between he and I before she was ever even born.
How far along were you at this point?
At this point, I was 2 months.
So you're 2 months pregnant, brutally assaulted. He's doing donuts in your parking lot. Did you have any help in law enforcement whenever you're reporting this?
No, I mean, they did issue the criminal trespass warning, but they never upheld it. We contacted them multiple times and they wouldn't enforce it. So
does he have ties to the political the political parties there or police officers or anybody in some sort of power?
I don't know the exact ties, but given the history that we've experienced in this county and the level of evidence and witnesses and testimony that they're willing to disregard, there has to be some kind of connection. I know
where does he work at?
He uses that as a shield a lot. He works for South Texas Nuclear Plant, South Texas Project, STP, and he is an engineer there. And so that's always been one of the first things that he tells law enforcement anytime, or CPS, anytime that they're coming to investigate. And it just kind of seems to shut everything down.
That's wild. So because he is an engineer at STP Nuke Plant, you think there's other reasons why they're shielding him from getting any trouble for harassing you, stalking you. Did you report the sexual assault?
I did.
You did report the sexual, and what happened with that?
So they sat on that the sheriff's department sat on that for over a year. I continuously contacted the investigator, Miss Harvey, and tried to bring her witnesses and evidence and different things that we were gathering, especially when the stalking and the harassment began as well. And she never sat down and interviewed me. She didn't pursue the investigation. I eventually went to a justice of the peace and sat down with all the same evidence and begged them for a protective order. And that's what ended up triggering his arrest for the aggravated sexual assault.
When you're going through these routes, is he doing anything? Are you noticing him following you on the roads, or are you seeing a trend of where you're possibly not safe going anywhere in this area? I mean, because Sargent's a small area. It's got to be extremely hard to hide in Sargent. So, especially when he knows where your business is. So, did he do any kind of following, stalking, stuff like that?
Oh yes. We set cameras up at one point and had photo and video evidence of that. My employees saw it as well. But there's a little park, just a little pull-in kind of park across the street from my marina. And throughout that time period, it was not uncommon to see him sitting on the bed of his truck on the tailgate with his binoculars, waiting for me to come out of my business. And he'd smile and wave at me from across the street, knowing that he couldn't come on the property, but that was protected.
So he's staying right at that certain line of, 500 feet or something? Yeah. So he's staying back just far enough to let you know he's watching you.
Exactly.
And he's just waving at you.
I went on a date at one point to the movie theater, and he was waiting outside the doors when the movies let out, and we were ambushed there.
What happened then?
He tried to get my date's name, which he went by a nickname anyway. So he didn't get a whole lot of information, but he was trying to pull information from my date. And he eventually found my date's email address and emailed him as well. But he contacted my customers, my vendors. He also started filing complaints with every agency that I reported to, from Texas Parks and Wildlife to the Texas Workforce Commission. We became first name basis with a lot of these various inspectors because they would get called out 2-3 times a week just for ridiculous claims, never cited for any of it, and they never found anything, just harassing.
So you had mentioned previously that he was told to stay off your property at the bait camp. Didn't you say that he pulled up in a boat one time, was harassing you in a boat because he couldn't drive to your property?
Yeah, he showed up by kayak and told them that, well, you said my truck couldn't be on the property. And he used that as his excuse to access my property by water. And that was completely accepted and allowed by law enforcement. He would also regularly bring his children out to the marina, and we had little family-friendly concerts and things. And he would make the threats of, well, what are you going to do? Traumatize my kids by having me arrested in front of them?
So he's guilt tripping you.
Kids are my highest priority, like any kids. And so I think he's known that that's always been my weakness.
So he's in clear violation of the restraining order. You have gone through the legal system. The constable, do you call the constable, sheriff's office? Who are you calling?
Both, constable and sheriff's office.
Did you ever try to contact the district attorney and tell him this isn't working?
For the criminal trespass warning, no. Once the arrest was made, I tried contacting them numerous times, and I was never able to reach them, and I never had any response back from them.
They weren't responding?
No.
At all?
No. I never heard back from that district attorney's office until August of last year for a different case.
Kaitlin, hold that thought. We need a word from our sponsors, but when we come back, I'd like to discuss how the abuse evolved and it included your newborn daughter, Charlotte.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
Need a barn built to last? At Stuckey Barns in Brazoria County, Texas, we blend quality craftsmanship with rugged durability and Texas pride to make your dream barn real. From custom barns to metal buildings, we build strong, local, and backed by a hometown service. Need bold, high-quality ink? Seven Souls Tattoo Studio has you covered. We're obsessively clean and professional, guiding you from idea to unforgettable art. Got old ink? We'll transform it into stunning new work with precision and creativity. Drop by Seven Souls at 20 Circle Way in Lake Jackson, Texas. Boat season's here. Is your ride ready? At Liquid Rides in Brazoria, we handle certified marine repairs and full engine builds. We're your Mercury Marine and PCM dealer, keeping you smooth all year. Plus custom stereo installs for boats, vehicles, side-by-sides, and Jeeps. Liquid Rides, custom audio, certified performance, built in Texas. Looking for real coverage from real people? Whether it's your home, car, or business, go see Landra Olson's team at Farmers Insurance in West Columbia, Texas, where hometown service meets top-rated protection. Spring's here, and it's time to get those flower beds and gardens in shape. Rifles Feed and Supply in Brazoria has soil, mulch, and everything you need to make your yard pop. plus the best feed and supplies for your animals. Fentanyl is taking our loved ones' lives every day, but knowledge can save them. Travis's Voice is dedicated to raising awareness, educating communities, and preventing future tragedies. To learn more, go to travis'svoice.org. And we're back with Kaitlan Ross, and she's sharing her horrific story of the abuse that she suffered at the hands of her ex-fiance, Aaron Mock, and now started to include her young daughter, Charlotte. Kaitlan, after you gave birth and tried to move on, how did Aaron shift his behavior and start using Charlotte as a tool to control you?
It happened very early. So he was invited to her delivery at the hospital. At this point, we had already relocated out of Matagorda County, but we were in Fort Bend where my OB was. And when I was still in the operating room having the C-section, he was removed from the hospital by staff because he was banging on the NICU doors and trying to use internal telephones to pick up and call various doctors and nurses stations, things along those lines. So he was asked to leave. He was allowed back in and then asked to leave again a couple of days later for the very similar behaviors, at which point he stayed in the parking lot of the hospital. And then I walked a visitor out to their vehicle, and he filed a CPS report for abandonment of my daughter within 3-4 days of her being born while she was still in the NICU. His shift to her happened very, very early on. He started the custody case seeking a temporary restraining order on November 16th, just 6 days after she was born. And that was granted, which also granted a geographic restriction ordering me to stay in Matagorda County, despite me not having a residence in Matagorda County.
So he turned everything around on you. Now you're the criminal.
Yes.
And the judicial system found you at fault.
Correct. I've been punished multiple times for not living in Matagorda County when I never had a house in Matagorda County.
It was a restraining order, right, at this point?
At that point, it was a temporary restraining order, and I was still admitted. So even when Charlotte was discharged, I went into congestive heart failure with her. And when I was served these papers, my eyes were literally swollen shut. I had gained 68 pounds of water weight overnight because my heart was failing. And that's how I was served this paperwork in a county that we didn't live in. That should not have been the proper venue because he wasn't even adjudicated as the father. And we weren't in that county for filing. So at minimum, it should have been Fort Bend, if not where we actually lived in Lampasas County.
So take us forward with that from that point forward when you get out of the hospital.
So we had a temporary orders hearing in February of 2019, and that was not served because they were only seeking to enforce getting a DNA test done, but they ended up issuing orders regardless, and they ordered drug test for both of us, which I complied with and was clear as expected. He held on to his drug test for over 1.5 years. And when it was finally released, we found out it was positive for amphetamines.
So we have an engineer working at the nuke plant, and he tested positive for amphetamines?
He did. And refused to turn over those results for a very long time. The day after is when the protective order went in place. So February 26, 2019 is when he was actually arrested for the May 4th, 2018 incident. And that put in temporary emergency exclusive custody for me. And so we went to live our life again up at the ranch and filing our responses as needed. Had two terrible attorneys early on in our case that refused to transfer our case. I believe it was November of 2020 was the next time we came back to court, and they found me in contempt for not living in Matagorda County when I didn't have a house in Matagorda County. And I kept trying to tell them that I did not live and I did not have a residence. They used my bait shop as my address, claiming jurisdiction over our case because I owned a commercial property.
So tell us about the shared custody that you had with Aaron Mock and how that went.
So at that point, he had only seen her a handful of times when she was about a month to 3 months old. I had agreed to do some visitations with him, supervised an hour at a time. You know, she's a newborn. He had let her head drop, and I asked him to put his hand behind her head to kind of support it. For a newborn, they don't have good neck control yet. He moved his hand down and put her on the counter and let her head tap on the counter and said, well, maybe you should be recording this for her safety and yours. And that was the last time that he saw her at about 3 months old, I believe it was, until 2021.
What happened in 2021?
In 2021, we filed a motion for a new trial after Judge Eslenbaum signed final orders for our case. I was not given notice of that hearing. I was not in attendance in that hearing. I was in Washington State, and the court knew that I was in Washington State and was not available. And so he signed final orders giving Aaron full custody because of the finding that I was not in Matagorda County. So we filed a motion for a new trial, and every judge in Matagorda County recused themselves due to conflicts that I am not conflicted with them, so it must be on the other party. That was the first recusal for Judge Denise Fortenberry, and then Judge Ben Harden recused himself as well, and we got our first assigned judge. And by the time that we got to that judge, our motion had already expired, right? We were past the timeline for them to have rendered an order. And so the judge asked us to file a modification, and she set aside that 2020 order and said it wasn't in her best interest, and she wanted to start some stair-step visits with the Mocks. Aaron is now married again at this time. And so she wanted to start some stair-step visitation with that, to which we agreed. And we began that under a modification that, again, should not have ever been filed because it was improper at the time.
It's got to be hard for you to want to let your daughter stay with him at this point because of the sexual assault and then him tapping your baby's head on the counter.
Yes.
What's going through your mind with this when you're having to drop your daughter off with him?
I'm told that there's an amicus now, and that her whole job is to make sure the best interest of my daughter is pursued. And so she is supposed to only be representing my daughter's best interest. And we're going to start real small with, hour-long visits, and then expand it a little bit, see how it goes, and expand it a little bit. I was a nervous wreck, but I thought there were safeguards in place to protect my child. And I'm told that that's my only route, right? That's the only thing that I can do is to allow access. And so that's what I do.
So tell us about the first time that you got your daughter back.
The second visit that we had, the first one was an hour long with an amicus, which went fine. The second visit that we ever had, I was the one supposed to supervise it. And Aaron shifted his attention to talking to some woman at the park and allowed our, at the time, 2-year-old to run in front of the swings and get kicked in the face. So she had a split lip from the very first kind of unsupervised by an official visit. And I requested the amicus come back and supervise these visits. And I was concerned, and I didn't feel like I was the right person to be doing this because it was making me a nervous wreck. And instead, she said that I was no longer allowed to bring any friend or family with me, which was kind of my safety blanket and being around my abuser, and that she was not going to come back and supervise. And instead, she started expanding into unsupervised. So the first unsupervised visit he had was for about an hour, and my daughter was returned from that visit smelling like pond water. She had mud and leaves in her hair. And I asked him, what happened? Why is my 2-year-old soaking wet and smelling like pond water? And he told me that it had rained. And it didn't rain anywhere else in Bay City that day, but it rained at that particular park. As the time got larger and larger, the injuries and concerns became greater and greater.
So you said that there was bruising at one point when you picked your daughter up. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So there were, I believe it was 16 separate incidents where she was returned with bruising either to her face, to her arms, strange imprints down her legs. And at this point, she starts coming home very angry. She's changing and reverting and potty training and things along those lines. But the only explanation that she gives is inanimate objects, like a dinosaur bit her, or the trash can beat her up, or the mean floor busted her lip. She had not made an outcry about a particular person at that point. And every time I brought those concerns to the amicus at that point, she seemed to expand the visitation. And so we began documenting everything, and I was letting my attorneys know.
So they're expanding the visitation, even though you're documenting all this bruising and the pond water incident and the kick in the head at the park. And
correct.
They're giving him more and more chances to see his daughter.
Correct.
There was a time that you said that she was hospitalized for sepsis.
Yes, that was one of the early on visits that she was returned wet. And then the next day she spiked a very high fever and had a very cruddy kind of sound in chest. When we took her into Cook's Children after we couldn't control her fever. And when they did the chest x-rays, they said that they found debris in her lungs and started her on antibiotics. They admitted her for sepsis with the debris in her lungs.
And this was right after you got her back?
Yes.
What do the doctors say? How does she get sepsis in her lungs?
So the sepsis is systematic. They didn't give any explanation as to how she got the debris in her lungs. But this wasn't the only time that she was hospitalized with big fevers or respiratory issues following visitations. And with the incidents that occurred later on, we had specialists in aquatic asphyxiation and asphyxiation review these medical files. And it was their belief that this could be a reaction to either asphyxiation, aquatic asphyxiation, or strangulation incidents that she wasn't making outcries on at that point, but she did make those outcries later on. So they think that these were potentially some of the earlier significant incidents.
What did she say about that? Your daughter, Charlotte.
She has said multiple things. So she says that they squeeze her neck real tight and make all the air go out. They squeeze her neck and it makes her head hot. They sit on her head. Mama sits on her head because she doesn't want to hear her cry. That they put her in the pool.
She calls Aaron's new wife Mama.
Mama. She calls me Mommy and she calls her Mama. And so most of her strangulation and asphyxiation outcries have been aimed at Shelby, and a lot of the large trauma on her ears and things have also been pointed at Shelby from Charlotte's statements.
So the hospital takes care of her. She's good at this point, right after the sepsis incident.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got to be super scared to ever let this man touch your daughter again.
Terrified.
Did you reach out to CPS? Did you talk to the DA, the sheriff, or anybody like that at this point?
Not at that point. I did not start those until Charlotte actually made the outcry that somebody was hitting her. She had always enjoyed going down to her dad's house at that point and was always very excited to see her siblings. She made her first outcry when we were taking her to an exchange for her to go with them. And she told me that mama hits her and that she doesn't want to go because she doesn't feel safe. And that's the first time that she actually said it was a person and not an inanimate object. And so at that point, we contacted law enforcement.
Prior to this, she wasn't talking. She wasn't making the outcries and being verbal about it. But now she's being verbal about it.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So at this point, she's how old?
3.5, 4.
So she's able to express herself a lot better now and tell you things.
Correct.
Did she
Correct.
ever tell you anything about a swimming pool?
Yes. Yeah. She told me that mama takes her floaties off when she's in the big pool and that she sinks and that she cannot swim and that she has special floaties that she can't talk about, but they don't make her float big. They make her sink down. So I'm not really sure what that is. Again, this is coming from a 3 or 4-year-old, but those are very concerning statements.
What else did she tell you about the abuse?
As we progressed to probably the worst incident, which was over her Christmas visit in December of 2022. So she had just turned 4 in this visit, and we already had a criminal case and a CPS case open from June of 2022. She has returned to us with over 40 injuries to her body. She lost 13% of her body weight. She has what measures to be an adult size bite mark to her face. Her ear cartilage has been hit so hard that it has blackened, and there is a bruise that spreads across the side of her head. And she told me that mama hit her too hard. She told her therapist, because we have her in therapy at this point, she told her therapist that mama hit her like this. She said that mama hates her and she is not family, and that is why she sits on her head, and that she asked daddy for help, but mama is his love, and so he won't help her because mama is sweet to daddy.
That's disgusting. That makes me super mad right now. So you got, at this point, you have the amicus, you have CPS, you filed police reports. Where is this going now at this point? Because surely they have to get involved and get this taken care of, right?
When we picked her up, we actually went straight to the sheriff's department in Matagorda County because there was already an open case. And so we go straight there, and the sheriff, so my daughter's nose was actively still bleeding when we picked her up. The sheriff sees her condition and calls EMS for an evaluation to make sure that they have the ability to take photos, or do we need to go straight to an emergency room? EMS could only take her to the local hospital, which is where stepmom worked at as a pediatric nurse and in labor and delivery.
Aaron's new wife is a pediatric nurse?
Yes.
At the hospital in Bay City?
Yes. At what kind of human you have to be to do these kind of things.
So what did law enforcement do at this point?
So the sheriff's department actually did take pictures, and then they asked if we could go over to the CAC. And so we went over to the Children's Advocacy Center, and they wanted to wait until they could get a forensic nurse scheduled, and then we'd go to the hospital and meet with that forensic nurse. So the sheriff's department found one, and we met them at St. Luke's up in Sugar Land, I believe it is. And that's where they did the forensic evaluation. They documented all of these 40 plus injuries. They actually sent her in for a CT scan to make sure her skull wasn't fractured from the one injury. The nurse, the law enforcement, Everyone contacted CPS. There was already an open CPS case. And so the first response that I get from CPS that evening while we're sitting at the hospital is, oh, well, my notes show that you're in the middle of a custody case and we don't get involved in civil disputes.
This is criminal. This is a criminal case.
I kind of asked her, how can me filing a motion into a family law case turn into adult-sized bite marks on my daughter's face, right? I'm not talking about the civil case. I'm talking about child abuse that is insanely obvious, well documented. She went to her therapist a couple of days later, and some of the injuries were still present. He would later testify that this was the worst case of out-of-hospital child abuse that he has ever seen in his years.
And who is this?
That would be Dr. Kit Harrison. He is a forensic psychologist that we started seeing after she was being returned with the injuries, but it was inanimate objects. So we were trying to figure out kind of the root cause of this. So that was his role. She had another play therapist with the Hill Country Children's Advocacy Center who also filed CPS reports because of the outcries that she made to her. So you have two therapists, a treating and a forensic, that are both making CPS intakes. Law enforcement made CPS intakes. EMS made CPS intakes. The forensic nurse made CPS intakes. The forensic nurse that the sheriff's department contacted and brought in now gives over this report identifying numerous signs of strangulation and asphyxiation, as well as all of the injuries. And she gives that to the sheriff's department, and they still don't do anything.
That just blows my mind. I mean, just pure neglect. The people that are not supporting you or Charlotte at this point are just as guilty of letting these monsters do this to your daughter.
Yeah, that's the part that really, really gets me is I knew he was a monster, right? I figured that out within about 2 months and I left. I knew he was dark. I knew he was evil. So I left him. But I expected the systems that we have to offer some level of protection, and that didn't happen, right? I expect him to be bad. I don't expect law enforcement and district attorneys' offices to fail in their duties and lie and just ignore things when they have all of the documentation, all of the evidence, and it's not just me saying it, right? I could see them going, okay, well, mom's biased, so we're going to take everything with a grain of salt. But when you have every doctor and agency who has seen my little girl turn to them and say, listen, there is child abuse happening, and they're just like, well, we don't get involved in civil disputes. Take it to court.
And you've documented it. You have recordings of this man screaming and yelling. You have recordings of things that your daughter said was happening. I mean, what's the most damning piece of evidence that you have against him that will corroborate what the physicians are saying about the child abuse and the neglect and all that? What's the most damning piece of evidence that you have that's
I mean, honestly, probably his own transcript, right? After that incident, we filed for an emergency hearing to get orders in and stop visitations because he had already been ordered by the judge in October to not let her be returned with any more injuries. And so now we are in early January following picking her up on December 29th, and we filed the emergency hearing for temporary orders, and the judge stops all of his visits until we can finish with the hearing. She only heard a little bit of testimony, but in that testimony, he admits that she did not arrive with all of these injuries. The judge was going to finish the hearing about a week later, and that's when Erin filed a motion to recuse that judge, which she did so voluntarily, and a new judge was assigned. And that next judge, under that hearing that occurred, he admitted he completely changed his story, changed his attorney, and now says, oh, well, actually, she arrived that way. I just forgot about it. Until my wife reminded me, I forgot that she actually arrived 10 days prior with 40 plus injuries. And when pushed on it, he admitted that he changed his testimony, and the judge made us move along in our questions after telling him that he had the right to remain silent and not incriminate himself.
This is in front of a jury trial?
No, this was just a bench trial. This was an emergency motion. Yeah. This was the first time we met that judge, who had been judges with his attorney back in Harris County. So now she's an assigned judge and he's an attorney, but they were actually judges together in their previous roles.
Kaitlin, we're out of time for today's show, but can you tell us about your family court case and where you're at this point?
Yes. So we're still under this judge number 5, Sherry Wydeen, who in April, in that emergency orders hearing, ordered Charlotte to actually go live with the Mocks. I was now the non-custodial parent, despite the prior judge's rulings. And we went to a jury trial as fast as we could to change that, instead of seeking a mandamus for that issue. And so we went to the jury trial expecting, a jury of our peers. And as it turned out, it was only a jury of his peers. Over 50% of the jury pool either worked for him, with him, or was a vendor for STP, the company that he works for. The jury foreman was actually an engineer for STP in his same office. And so they came back with joint managing conservatorship after it was argued that since there was no arrest, it was not child abuse. And we found out later the DA had not even taken it to grand jury yet. But currently, a mandamus has just been filed today, trying to correct a lot of these jurisdictional errors and these atrocious orders that we are currently under. But as it stands, I have not seen Charlotte since May of last year. I have only been able to talk to her 2 times since then. I have found out that she had missed at least 35 days of school last year, so she'll likely not receive credit for her kindergarten class. And she had some kind of throat surgery done, and I'm trying to get more information in regards to that, because they said she had chronic sleep apnea, which had never been an issue before. And so most healthy, 6-7-year-old little girls don't have chronic sleep apnea. And so we still have a lot of questions about that. We've got an open records request at the Office of the Attorney General, and we're still waiting for the CPS documents and reports from that December 2022 incident that have been requested for well over a year. And we're just waiting on those to be able to move forward.
Kaitlin, I'm so sorry you had to deal with what you dealt with, and now your daughter's having to deal with it. And I'm sure my whole entire audience feels the same way. Greatly appreciate you coming on the show and telling us this hard story.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I know you have a lot more to tell us, and we'd love to have you back on for a part 2 in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good. I look forward to it.
Thank you, Kaitlin. God bless. Folks, this isn't just Kaitlin's story. This is happening all across America. Family courts ignoring evidence, CPS brushing off bruising, and abusers using kids as weapons with zero accountability. Follow Kaitlin's story, share this episode, and if you're anywhere in Texas and this kind of corruption is happening, start showing up to courtrooms, filing complaints, and calling out the officials who've allowed this to happen. Please also let us know here at the Kevin Henry Podcast if this is happening to you. We'll be your voice. Visit us at kevinhenrypodcast.com and sign up for our newsletter. We'll keep you updated on Kaitlin's story and many others. Enough is enough. Until next time, keep fighting the good fight.